Oh, let's go. Hey, I don't even want to waste any time because, Perry Baker came with the hard hitting questions. Now, obviously, I got to always set it up. What is it that Perry Baker wants? Perry Baker is saying that the U.S. needs to improve the way that it wants to. If it wants to rise, if it wants to elevate, it's got to make a choice. Y'all know this is Perry Baker, two-time World Rugby Sevens Player of the Year, freaking USA Rugby's all-time leading scorer, third all-time leading scorer in the world. This is the GOAT, the legend, Hall of Famer. The man said, I'm make the name for it. We are not celebrating him enough as a U.S. He is our Jomo Lomo, all right, in the U.S. That is exactly what it is. Oh, he didn't play 15. Nah, mug. And he's actually here to explain exactly why. He's like, I'm not playing the 15. So what is it that he said? Perry Baker put it on his Twitter. He was like, for rugby to grow in America, clubs and pathways need to model the international levels. 15s or 7s, just one option. Bruh. Hey, man, like I said, that is the GOAT. All right. That man has been in it. He's been in some of the biggest games. He is a two-time Olympian, about to be a three-time, been in the Rugby World Cup sevens. This man has been in so many HSBC 7 series for the last 10 years. It's on his last hurrah. Like, this guy knows what he's talking about. That being said, I staunchly disagree with this concept. Because of the fact that I don't think rugby is in a position anymore to be selective on what it wants to do. Look, I get it. So with the 7 side, it makes a lot of sense, especially that for a lot of people say USA should really be working on being on the 7s. 7s is where the US is able to thrive most. We're able to see the greatest amount of turnover. Obviously, Los Angeles Sevens is the biggest rugby tournament that happens in the U.S. every single year. Why not just focus on 7s? Obviously, we got Premier Sevens, the Premier Sevens League here with by Owen Scannell. We got 7s in the bag. Like, that's what it's about. Good point. And obviously, the Olympic Committee supports 7s. But I think that's actually the really big issue, is the big issue there. The biggest source of money that comes for the Olympic 7s is because of the Olympic Committee and it being part of the, distribution of money by the Olympic funds to hold the USA national program. Well, what about HSBC 7s and what about Premiership 7s? I don't know enough about Premiership 7s to be able to say. I think obviously they're growing. I do think it's actually a legitimately good program. It's a good league. But I very much a strong believer that 7s doesn't work at a long-term level. And let me tell you why. It is a great middle funnel. I'm not even going to say top of the funnel because social media, TV programming, that's top of the funnel. All right. 7s is a great middle funnel to actual resourcing because obviously, like so many people say, it's a short game, it's a fast game, it's easy to understand, doesn't have that many players, people can conceptualize it a lot. And I've talked to friends who don't know rugby who have been like, I was able to get it. My issue that comes with it is that it is so much a microcosm version of rugby that you don't actually have a chance to be able to create definitive loyalties, right? Like from an individual standpoint, I think we should be making stars. We obviously probably are better at naming 7 stars in the US and obviously 15s. But I think 7 stars are easier to be able to be named. But I do think that because it's so many games and the power that Rugby Sevens has is that it feels like it's an event. It is an event each and every time. It's not a business. Let me correct that. It's not a season. It's an event. So if you're talking about every week, I'm playing the same 12 teams in some way, shape, or form, or every couple weeks, and I watch this for 8 hours a day, every day for 3 days, it can build a crowd because it's an event. Like Hong Kong Sevens is one of the biggest parties in rugby. Why? Because people just sit and do and yada, yada, yada. It's like baseball to an extent, but I really actually liking sevens in terms of how its impact goes to what cricket was before T25. And I feel like cricket was one of those where it's like, yo, this thing can last a week long. We're here about the community. We're here about the stay. This is something that we want to be with our families. But the sport itself was not the most important component. And I think when it comes to seven, it's very difficult for it to be the most important component because you're waiting 2-3 hours for your team to play for 15 minutes of time of speed play. And if you're not really comprehending it, you see the score, but you don't see what the whole denotation. It's a travel sport, 100%. I think it's great for tourism. I think it's great for being able to pick up and put into the different places. Like bring people to areas where they might not go. But to do this consistently every week and be able to match it and make sure that you are creating not just a loyalty, but also like you're stealing attention. Like your job is to steal attention. I think sevens has too easy of a drop off when you don't either know what your schedule is or you have to wait for your team. And again, like I said, I think it's like baseball and cricket. Much better product in person than it can sometimes be on TV. Simply because it takes so much time. I understand where he's coming from because yes, every country in some way, shape, or form typically uses sevens for one set of players and then 15s for another set of players. And that's mostly in the men's side. From the women's side, obviously they combined more. And I've been very, very audible about how much I loved that 2017 USA Rugby World Cups team. And honestly, it was USA, Great Britain, England, New Zealand, and Australia. Like not Australia, but the other three: New Zealand, England, and the USA. Their sevens players were also 15s players. And so we got to see the absolute dynamicism of that sevens players within the more easily contained and more presentable 15 side. Yes, I know 15s is more chaotic. Yes, I know there's more rules for people to go. And yes, I know scrums and rucks can slow down the game. But when you're talking about creating intent and holding viewership, like that regular, like incessive, play plays in. I know attention spans are much shorter, but I legitimately do believe, which is why things like American football in the US continues to rise in viewership. Basketball is actually losing viewership. I think it's why hockey kind of stays in the middle. And then soccer kind of finds its way because you're not like when you have fewer games and you have less time or more constricted limitations on what you're doing, whether you're watching or whether you're at the game itself, you have to pay attention because everything matters in the moment. If I know you're going to be playing the same basic rotation of teams 1 week to the next, 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 at some point I go like, we're just running around in circles to ultimately say we're just getting points to be able to call this a, what do you call it? Call this a end game competition. Like I want to see certain levels. I want to see I want to see, New Orleans versus the Free Jacks 1 week, and then New Orleans versus Old Glory the next week, and New Orleans versus Houston Sabercats. And each of those are isolated into themselves, right? So then whenever the playoffs comes around, the teams I never got to see, maybe this is where we get to see the competition. All right. And it's not, we have the same exact advantages. We have the same tape. We have the same knowledge, but we're really going head to head. And this one means the most. If I know they played that same rotation of team every single week in some way, and we get relatively the same people in it, maybe one or two people will shift. Why do I want to watch a full season? What would I do past that? So that part is why I don't think that sevens alone should be able to do it. But I'm a believer that we should mix the two. I think that we've lost a dynamic amount of star power and usage of the platform because we're not mixing our players together. And I get it, 15s and sevens, they have kind of different, what do you call it? They have different ways of training, but I think that's also part of the power. Like, I want my sevens players to be coming in, like, they understand spacing. They understand how to be able to get the biggest amount of burst because that's what they're used to doing. They can get to a breakdown and they might have to learn how to do a breakdown, but in 15s, the breakdown that they have to learn can be used also for sevens for trying to close up gaps whenever you have a big old boys like Fiji or New Zealand to be able to go deal with. And whereas on the other side, the forwards now get to up their game so they have to play faster to keep up with the wings that are going on with sevens that have probably more stamina because they've had to play more sprints within a shorter period of time. But the breakdowns are become much more easier if you bring one or two maybe into sevens so that you can do it. And even if you don't bring your forwards into sevens, like your centers and all those guys, they now become a lot more dynamic in terms of how they utilize their spacing. So I don't think it's one or the other. I actually think the rest of the world has been failing on that. That significantly. I know the schedules don't allow it, and there's a play of overworking the body, but I think the one thing the women's have done have been able to take advantage of that. You take advantage of that. You have your sevens players play 15s playing the Rugby World Cup, and you get to see them do that, and then you get to go see them in the sevens round. Those forwards, you get to see them put up with the fast players, and then every once in a while, you might see one of them cross over. Like, what would happen if you put Ileana Mar at center going into it, or put her at lock going into 15s? I feel like we have a completely different outcome with our women's team. What happens if you get someone like Ben Pinkelman? What he does, he plays on both sides. What happens if you had Perry Baker and Carlin Isles on either side? We did have Carlin for 15s once, and I know Carlin doesn't really play anymore. But what if Perry had been playing 15s as well? Like, how much more could we have seen him like really break out and do? I know he's thin, but he's a strong dude. He's not like he's lanky, not skinny, not breakable. So I do think it's more of a lost art. Like, I'm glad that you got guys like in France, like Dupont, who's saying, no, I'm not going to play 15s this year. I'm not going to play international 15s. I'm going to go ahead and get ready for the seventh side. And I'm nervous. That's different. We should be doing that. I love it that you had guys like Sonny Bill Williams who just jumped around all of rugby. While he wasn't great at any one of them, he was dynamic, but it was like, I want to be able to see that. I don't think his folly is the example of what is not going to work. Like, it really is just synchronization. And I do feel like, it's something that's lost. So let me know what you guys think. Average Rugger, bad. Thought it was showed. Average Rugger said, sevens is a picking ground for 15s. For example, look at the last 15s World Cup. How many backs from the sevens programs? Colby, Quagga Smith, and a lot more. I agree. Exactly. Like, that's where you wanted to be able to see, like, you see one element for another. And it brings two different training programs, but they also complement themselves. It's almost this wild idea, which I think is really, really terrible at sometimes, is that when it comes to rugby, we have such a heavy belief that you have to be just rugby, when it is shown ad nauseum that a kid or a player that comes from multiple sports and is able to use the dynamicness of all these different sports are going to be able to perform better, or at least adjust better in a lot of ways, because of the fact that they can use different skill sets from different sports to be able to improve maybe one that they're focusing on. That's why we love people like Deion Sanders, baseball player, track star, football player, or Bo Jackson, baseball player, archer, football genius. I can go on. Of course, from the football scene, that's my lane. But like, you see that so often. Alev Kelter, a hockey player turned rugby player. Like, those multi-sports athletes have a lot more experiences to pull on, and they don't fall into the same old habits, and hence they can give them different weapons. So once again, let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this. It's not something that I am terribly like a big fan of this precision of choose one or the other. But again, I don't discredit. This is Perry's opinion. And I'd love to talk to him more about it, but he knows. He's been in the program. He's played against the best, not some of the best. He's played against the best. So he knows a lot more than maybe I have on hand. But from a spectator standpoint, I just think it's something that's a lost art. And for average player, no, Perry Baker doesn't play 15s because he focuses on sevens. Carlin Isles for a split second played 15s with Glasgow, and then a little bit for USA Rugby, but ultimately ended up at sevens before, I guess, for the time being, has stepped away from rugby. I'm not sure if it's indefinitely or not. He never made an official retirement thing, but it's been like 5 years since we've seen him on the pitch. So, take it for whatever that is. All right. I ain't convinced.